It is morning now, and Zeus flings strife down to the Achaean ships. Standing on the ship of Odysseus, in the middle of the line of Achaean vessels, strife gives a high-pitched cry, causing the Achaeans to lust for battle and war. Agamemnon cries out with his men, calling them to arms, and begins dressing for battle. He first wraps greaves around his legs with silver ankle clasps, then dons the breastplate, a gift long ago from Cinyras, the king of Cyprus, with 10 bands of blue enamel, 12 bands of gold, and 20 of beaten tin, and dark blue serpents writhing toward the throat. He slings his sword over his shoulder and grabs his shield. Circling the center, 10 strong rings of bronze with 20 discs of glittering tin set in, at the heart a boss of bulging blue steel, and there, like a crown, the Gorgon's grim mask, the burning eyes, the stark, transfixing horror, and round her strode the shapes of rout and fear. Last, Agamemnon puts on his helmet, and at the sight of him, Hera and Athena are awestruck and loose a crack of thunder. The Achaeans are now lined up for battle, and begin advancing toward the Trojans and Hector. And the men, like gangs of reapers, slashing down the reaping rows and coming closer, closer across the field of a warlord rich in wheat or barley, swaths by the armfuls falling thick and fast, so Achaeans and Trojans closed and slashed, lunging into each other, and neither side now had a thought of flight that would have meant disaster. No, the pressure of combat locked them head to head, lunging like wolves, and strife with wild groans exulted to see them, glaring down at the melee, strife alone of immortals hovering over the fighters. The fighting goes on throughout the morning until the Achaeans smash through the Trojans. Agamemnon leads them and kills many men. First he kills Bienor, who charges into Agamemnon's spearhead ramming sharp. The rim of the bronze helmet could not hold it. Clean through heavy metal and bone the point burst, and the brains splattered all inside the casque. Agamemnon then batters down Oileus, then kills Essus and Antiphus, 2 sons of Priam. Essus he stabbed his chest with a spear above the nipple. Antiphus he hacked with a sword across the ear, and hurled him from his chariot, rushing fast to rip the splendid armor off their bodies. Think how a lion, mauling the soft, weak young of a running deer, clamped in his massive jaws, cracks their backbones with a snap. He's stormed in, invading the lair to tear their tender hearts out, and the mother doe, even if she's close by, what can she do to save her fawns? She's helpless. Terrible trembling racks her body too, and suddenly off she bounds through the glades and the thick woods, drenched in sweat, leaping clear of the big cat's pounce. So not a single Trojan could save those 2 from death. They fled themselves before the Argive charge. Agamemnon then kills Pisander and Hippolochus, who beg for their lives. He pitched Pisander off the chariot onto earth and plunged a spear in his chest. The man crashed on his back as Hippolochus leapt away, but him he killed on the ground, slashing off his arms with a sword, lopping off his head, and he sent him rolling through the carnage like a log. He left them there for dead, and just at the point where most battalions scattered, Agamemnon charged. The rest of his troops in armor quick behind him now, infantry killing infantry, fleeing headlong, hard pressed, drivers killing drivers. Under the onrush, dust and whirlwinds driven up from the plain, hooves of stallions rumbling thunder, bronze flashing, immense slaughter, and Aue's King Agamemnon whirling to kill, crying his Argives on, breakneck on. Like devouring fire roaring down onto dry dead timber, squalls hurling it on, careening left and right in brush ripped up by the roots goes tumbling under, crushed by the blasting fire rampaging on. So under Atreides' onslaught, Trojans dropped in flight, stampedes of massive stallions dragged their empty chariots, clattering down the passageways of battle, stallions yearning to feel their master's hands at the reins, but there they lay, sprawled across the field, craved far more by the vultures than by wives. Zeus draws Hector from the fighting while the Trojans are being put to rout and retreating to the walls of Troy. The Trojans streaked in flight past Ilus Barrow, ancient son of Dardanus, past the midfield mark of the plain and past the wild fig, and struggling to reach Troy, and always in hot pursuit, and shrieking, Agamemnon splattered with gore, his hands, invincible hands. At the Scaean gates in the great oak, the Trojans and Achaeans halt and form up for battle, waiting for the advance of the other side, while stragglers are hunted and killed. Zeus sends a message down to Hector. Away with you now, Iris, quick as the wind, and speed this word to Hector. So long as he sees Lord Marshal Agamemnon storming among the champions, mowing columns down in blood, Hector must hold back, command the rest of his men to fight the enemy, stand their headlong charge. But as soon as a spear or bow shot wounds the king, and Atreides mounts his chariot once again, then I will hand Hector the power to kill and kill, till he cuts his way to the benched ships, and the sun sinks, and the blessed darkness sweeps across the earth. Iris delivers the message to Hector, and he obeys as the fighting begins to continue. Agamemnon leads the charge of the Achaeans and kills Ephidamus and Kuon, Antenor's sons. However, Agamemnon is wounded by Kuon and must retreat from the battle. At this, Hector rallies his men and charges the Achaean ranks. The Achaean ranks hold, being led by Odysseus and Diomedes. But Paris shoots an arrow through the foot of Diomedes, who shouts at the son of Priam. So brave with your bow and arrows, big bravado, glistening love locks, roving eye for girls. Come, try me in combat, weapons hand to hand. Bow and spattering shafts will never help you then. You scratch my foot and you're vaunting all the same. But who cares? A woman or idiot boy could wound me so. The shaft of a good-for-nothing coward's got no point, but mine's got heft and edge. Let it graze a man. My weapon works in a flash and drops him dead, and his good wife will tear her cheeks in grief. Her sons are orphans, and he, soaking the soil red with his own blood, he rots away himself. More birds than women flocking round his body. Odysseus defends Diomedes while he yanks the arrow from his foot, then gets into his chariot and drives away. Odysseus is now alone against the Trojans, and he speaks to himself. Oh, dear God, what becomes of Odysseus now? A disgraceful thing if I should break and run, fearing their main force. But it's far worse if I'm taken all alone. Look, Zeus just drove the rest of my comrades off in panic flight. But why debate, my friend? Why thrash things out? Cowards, I know, would quit the fighting now, but the man who wants to make his mark in war must stand his ground and brace for all he's worth, suffer his wounds, or wound his man to the death. Odysseus is wounded, not fatally, and he becomes surrounded by Trojans. Menelaus and great Ajax come to his rescue. Menelaus leads Odysseus away from the fighting, and Ajax guards the rear of the Achaean retreat. Machaon, the Achaean healer, is also wounded, and Nestor drives him back to the ships. Achilles, from the stern of his ship, sees Nestor in his chariot with a wounded man. He tells Patroclus to go to Nestor's tent and see who it was that was wounded. Patroclus arrives at the tent and is welcomed by Nestor, who invites him to sit, but Patroclus refuses. "No time to sit, old soldier dear to the gods. You won't persuade me, awesome and quick to anger, the man who sent me here to find out who's been wounded, the one you've just brought in. But I can see him. I recognize Machaon myself, the expert healer. So back I go to give Achilles the message. Well, you know, old soldier loved by the gods, what sort of man he is, that great and terrible man. Why he'd leap to accuse a friend without a fault." And Nestor gives a lengthy response. "Now why is Achilles so cast down with grief, for this or that Achaean winged by a stray shaft? He has no idea of the anguish risen through the army. Look, our finest champions laid up in the ships, all hit by arrows or run through by spears. There's powerful Diomedes brought down by an archer, Odysseus wounded, and Agamemnon too, the famous spearman, and Eurypylus took a shaft in the thigh, and here Machaon, I just brought him in from the fighting, struck down by an arrow whizzing off the string. But Achilles, brave as he is, he has no care, no pity for our Achaeans. How long will he wait till our ships that line the shore go up in flames, gutted despite a last-ditch stand, and we ourselves are mowed down in droves? And I, what good am I? My limbs are gnarled now, the old power's gone. Oh, make me young again, and the strength inside me steady as a rock." Nestor goes on to recount the battles that he fought in as a young man, and he tries to get Patroclus to convince Achilles to join the fighting. He ends his speech saying, "But if deep down some prophecy makes him balk, some doom his noble mother revealed to him from Zeus, at least let Achilles send Patroclus into battle. Let the whole Myrmidon army follow your command. You might bring some light of victory to our Argives. And let him give you his own fine armor to wear in war, so the Trojans might take you for him, Patroclus. Yes, hold off from attack, and Achaea's fighting sons get second wind, exhausted as they are. Breathing room in war is all too brief. You're fresh, unbroken, they're bone-weary from battle. You could roll those broken Trojans back to Troy, clear of our ships and shelters." So Patroclus runs back to Achilles. On the way, he comes across Eurypylus, who was wounded in the fighting, an arrow to the thigh. At the sight of him limping along, Patroclus bursts out, "Poor men, lords of the Argives, O my captains, how doomed you are! Look, far from your loved ones and native land, to glut with your shining fat the wild dogs of battle here in Troy. But come, tell me, Eurypylus, royal fighter, can the Achaeans, somehow, still hold monstrous Hector? Or must they all die now, beaten down by his spear?" And Eurypylus answers, "No hope, Patroclus, prince, no bulwark left. They'll all be hurled back to the black ships, all of them. All our best in the old campaigns are laid up in the hulls. They're hit by arrows, pierced by spears, brought down by Trojan hands, while the Trojans' power keeps on rising. Save me at least. Take me back to my black ship. Cut this shaft from my leg. In the dark blood, wash it out of the wound with clear, warm water, and spread the soothing, healing salves across it. The powerful drugs they say you learned from Achilles and Chiron, the most humane of centaurs, taught your friend. As for our own healers, Podaliaris and Machaon, One is back in the shelters, wounded, I think. Machaon needs a good strong healer himself. He's racked with pain. The other is still afield, standing up to the Trojans' slashing onslaught. So Patroclus helps Eurypylus back to his shelter and tends to his wounds.